So last year I watched this awesome video by artist Maddie Carl, where she talks about some of her characters from tabletop RPG games. As a fellow D&D fan, I was immediately inspired to make a similar video. So I selected a handful of my characters, some old favourites, and a couple of yet to be played hopefuls. I also recommend you guys check out Maddie's video. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Anyway, on with the show. T, a half-elf ranger whose name is forgotten to time, was my first character that lasted long enough for me to get invested in. I made him when I was still rather new to tabletop RPGs, so I never came up with a fleshed out backstory for him beyond being a hunter for the local town the campaign was centered around. If anything, all of who T was as a character was created through the campaign, and oh boy, did that lead to some interesting conclusions. Suffice to say, T went through hell and back during the campaign. Starting as a lawful neutral with a heart of gold and a sense of justice and fairness, he quickly found himself dealing with a whole lot of crazy. From witnessing the soul of a small child being ripped from her body and devoured, to spending several months with a lich's soul whispering into his ear, and then accidentally turning his oldest companion into a vampire. I'm honestly surprised he didn't end up a complete madman by the end of it, though he was pretty far gone at times, like when he didn't notice being turned into a woman for at least a solid month in-game. Out of all my characters, T is my favourite to talk about. By the end of the campaign, he had more than his share of battle scars, and his degraded sanity bounced his alignment to chaotic good. However, despite having to murder his oldest companion in the party, he did get a relatively happy ending. He married the local priestess, whose father he had killed to gain the favour of her god, and found a way to destroy both the gender-bending cursed necklace and the lich's phylactery he had gotten stuck with. Good times, had by all, except that one time a giant tick bit out his eye. Selin Moonwhisper, a wood elf shadow monk, holds the honour of being my first ever female character in D&D. She has proven to be near unstoppable in one-on-one combat across 2 different adventures. Raised in a monastery that guards an ancient ruin lying deep within a forest, she spent many years training in solitude. Eventually, she received a new task, to go out into the world and investigate whatever strange thing is going on. I intentionally left some details in her background vague so I could slot her into just about any adventure. Playing Dragon Queen? She's sent to investigate the cult and discover if they have plans to find and raid the ruins. Playing Princes of the Apocalypse? There's a disturbance in the elements and she's sent to find out why. Normally my characters do their best to talk to NPCs and fellow party members, oftentimes becoming the party leader or face depending on the situation. Syllin, however, is the total opposite of that. Having spent decades alone, and being from a functionally mute all-female monastery, she rarely speaks and has difficulty understanding some social norms. She's absolutely enamored with the food and drink of society, but often relies on the party to buy it for her because she's yet to see coins as something of value, giving most of her share of loot back to the party. On top of that, she hardly ever speaks, opting to communicate through drawings or hand and body gestures. When she does talk, she makes a point to use as few words as possible, though often ends up unintentionally insulting NPCs due to how bluntly direct she can be. Beyond that, there are 2 events of note involving Syllin, both from her first adventure. The first event was the result of her original design, where she was intended to look androgynous and often be mistaken for a man. I have since dropped that aspect of her design, but it did play into one of the funniest moments I've ever experienced in D&D. We were 57 days into a 60-day long caravan trip when Syllin was accused of murder. The accuser, while yelling in rage, referred to her as a man, only to have another NPC point out that she was in fact a woman. This gobsmacked not only the accuser, but apparently almost the entirety of the caravan. I had not expected the GM to play on that aspect of the character, and he hit me with a hilarious curveball. The second one was in the introduction of an NPC. I won't say which NPC, as I think they are plot relevant to the adventure, but I will say that they took a lot of interest in the party rogue. The aura of notice me senpai levels of bromance were high, and Syllin became mildly obsessed with it. I had never expected to play a character who shipped other characters in-game, and it quickly became the party's favourite in-joke. I love playing Syllin, and I can't wait to get another chance to drop into some random adventure. For quite a while, my GM and I hoped somebody would be brave enough to create a wild magic sorcerer in one of our parties. I, as I often do, got impatient and decided to write one up myself. The result? One Carrion Mayroon, the tiefling wild magic sorcerer who never was. Unfortunately, I've yet to play her as my original background idea was rejected by my GM, on the grounds of being law-breaking. That is, Carrion's hometown was written as a fictional settlement within a relatively safe area of the Underdark. By the Underdark standards, of course, where she was born and raised by her ex-adventurer tiefling mother and human father. I had been looking forward to playing Carrion, as I felt she was more like Syllin than any other character I had played up to that point. Driven by wanderlust that her mother instilled in her with stories of gardens, forests, and especially the moon, Carrion has an overwhelming fascination for everything and anything new. As you can imagine, growing up in the Underdark, there weren't much in the way of streams, lakes, trees, or flowers. Just the idea of them was amazing to her. Plus, being a strange person in what to her would be a strange land will let me play up another angle I've never run with before. Sadly, I'm not sure when I will get to play Carrion, as the one group that allowed her current backstory is yet to start up, making me question if it actually will. Fortunately, I've come up with an alternate backstory for her to be more lore-friendly to Faerun and my usual GM. Still, I eagerly await to play her and explore her growth as a character, and mess about with her odd personality. Having come from such a strange home, she would express herself in a way that is unusual in the eyes of regular people, from being aggressively protective of even common plants and weeds, to staring at the moon for hours. My most anticipated trait, however, is her tendency to pretend to not understand any local languages to avoid situations she doesn't want to take any part in. Which is an easy feat if you can just blabber out some random bit of infernal or undercommon at people and give them a convincingly confused looking face. In my head, it just seems like so much fun. Granted, I'm far more invested in getting to play my next character. Zephyr Salt Spray. Finally, I had to talk about Zephyr fucking Salt Spray. Another tiefling sorcerer, Zephyr was born in Waterdeep, orphaned at sea by Sahagwan raiders, promptly found a few days later by pirates, and then taken back to Skullport to be sold as a slave. Thankfully, this is where she was found and rescued, and technically bought by one Nyx Shadowcloak. A smuggler by trade and captain of a ship called the Salt Spray, she and the crew turned out to be surprisingly good and righteous people. They instilled values like loyalty and justice into Zephyr, and quickly became the family she never had. Zephyr even took the ship's name as her own, so great was the bond she felt with her new family. Things only got better when her innate magical powers were awoken by witnessing a brilliant aurora one night, causing winds to wrap around the ship and lightning to arc off her body. Did I mention that she was a storm bloodline sorcerer? No. Well, I have now. To top it off, after reaching adulthood aboard a ship that smuggled people to safety and brought much needed supplies to areas that weren't supposed to receive them, Captain Nyx revealed to Zephyr that she was a member of the Harpers. Essentially a super secret information network with good intentions, Nyx had Zephyr inducted into the group. Being sailors that visited many ports meant that they had plenty of work given to them by both the Harpers and the local underbellies of the ports. Unfortunately, the good times weren't to last forever. At the age of 26, a second tragedy befell Zephyr. Nyx, roughly a third of the crew, and herself were ashore in the port of Chult, attempting to convince the local authorities to let them dock in the harbour. While they were in the middle of negotiations, the Salt Spray was attacked as it waited in the bay. The ship was sunk and the crew was slaughtered by pirates and sharks. This dealt a heavy blow to everyone ashore, eventually resulting in Nyx disbanding the remaining crew and disappearing. Zephyr, like her captain before her, swore to track down the attackers and take vengeance upon them. This led to a nearly 2-year-long journey working for the Harpers, while doing her best to dig up any clues as to the whereabouts of the pirates that destroyed her home. And that was where she was supposed to come into a Princes of the Apocalypse game, having found some clues and receiving a mission from the Harpers which had led her to the Desserin Valley. Unfortunately, the group I was playing with swapped over to the Tomb of Annihilation, and I had to drop out anyway due to scheduling issues. Hopefully, though, I can play her someday. Finally, I present to you my gnome rogue, flavoured as a stealthy monster hunter. Tana Timbers, or Sprocket as her friends would know her, was an orphan raised by a monster hunter who intended for her to become his successor. Eventually, she was sent out on her own to prove herself a worthy successor, and told only to return once she had done so. With this as her driving motivation, and a pendant shaped like a winged ankh gifted from her mentor, she struck out into a life of an adventurer. Things did not go so well for her, however. I didn't title her the Slain Hunter for nothing after all. It all started in Ravenloft, with a very dysfunctional party. A string of unfortunate events, mostly set in motion by key members of the party, quickly saw the party split in 3 ways by the middle of our 3rd session. This left Tana, and the party bard if I recall correctly, alone in the tavern all night after having lost track of all the others. Eventually one of the other players rocked up again, only to be revealed as a vampire spawn whose hunger for blood quickly squashed what little remaining sanity he had left. A fight broke out, with the bard being slaughtered before the beast turned its fangs on Tana. Unable to take down her former ally alone, she was bitten, drained, and after failing the saving throw, turned into a vampire spawn herself. This would be only her first death. A new party, a new DM, and a not so new adventure. Horde of the Dragon Queen might not be the best adventure, but I was comfortable enough with it that I felt confident bringing Tana back for a second go around. Things seemed to be looking up at first, but unfortunately the good luck wouldn't last. The objective was simple: find any people still in the town and bring them to the safety of the keep. We found the people, holed up inside a local church, surrounded by cultists. Obviously, combat ensued. Tana, being one of the few melee party members, was quickly cornered and killed by a couple of drakes. Luckily, the rest of the party managed to save their villagers and retrieve her body. Thank the stars, the local priest was able to resurrect her afterwards at the keep. Shortly after that, however, the following morning, one of the cultist leaders rocked up demanding a duel. It seemed he was very pissed off and maybe a little impressed by the party's ability to drive off a very dangerous monster he had recruited to attack the town. And by the party, I mean Tana, who had just about driven off the beast single-handedly. Despite the party's reservations about it, she agreed to the duel, and even held her ground for a while. Things went south, however, when one of the party members violated the duel by firing an arrow at the cultist, fearing that Tana was about to be slain if he did not act. This just served to piss off the warrior more, who then unleashed a devastating breath attack. Too weak to withstand the attack, and failing her dex save on top of that, Tana took the full brunt of the blow and fell to the ground, dead for a second time in less than a day. Eventually they did resurrect Tana again, but she was understandably reluctant to travel with the party again. Instead she stepped out of the adventure, in order to go and make enough gold with which to repay the priest for having resurrected her the second time at his own expense. That was the last time I used Tana, but hopefully in the future I can, like with Syllin, bring her back for another adventure. So yeah, that is 5 of my D&D characters. I've played and planned way more, but some of those I don't recall in as much detail, or were nowhere near as long-lived or interesting. Still, if people want to hear about more of my D&D adventures or characters, I encourage you to let me know in the comments below. Again, I totally recommend checking out Carl's video and channel. Links to both of those in the description. Also, if you want to help support this channel and my random shenanigans, consider dropping some spare change into my tip jar on Patreon, or joining my Discord server. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter, @MidnightPint, for news and updates. Until next time, cheers.